It's the year 1881. You've just finished tying up a priest and putting your rattlesnake back in the canvas sack it lives in, and now you're off to blow up a doctor's wagon with an explosive that hasn't been invented yet. Is this some sort of fever dream, or have you been playing a real-time tactics game from the early 2000s? Hi, I'm Calvin, and today we're going to take a look at Desperados, wanted dead or alive. Desperados is a stealth-focused real-time tactical game created by Spellbound Entertainment and published by Infogrames. It's a bit of an oddity for me, as it's exactly the sort of game that I would find myself playing back in 2001, but for some reason I never gave it a look. Perhaps it was marketed poorly, or maybe it was the mixed reviews, who knows. Whatever the reason, I totally forgot that it existed until one of you lovely people mentioned it in a comment a week or two ago. Based on that recommendation, and the fact that it cost me less than the price of a cheese sandwich, I picked up a copy and have become pretty familiar with it over the last few days. It's set in 1881, somewhere approaching the tail end of the Old West. You play as the smooth-talking, gun-slinging John Cooper on a mission to capture the notorious outlaw El Diablo for the most noblest of reasons, $15,000. What follows is a series of 25 individual missions as John attempts to track down and apprehend El Diablo. However, John is going to need some help, so you must first recruit a posse of talented but misguided misfits. These include Sam, a prospector with a knack for explosives, McCoy, a crooked doctor, and Kate, a notorious card cheat with a skirt full of tricks. As expected, the first half-dozen missions also serve as a tutorial where you get to learn how the game works and test out the abilities of your new companions. To its credit, the game does a half-decent job of blending in the tutorial elements with actual gameplay and character development. This makes the process enjoyable enough that you're only vaguely aware of it and doesn't waste time teaching you stuff that you could easily have figured out on your own. Like many other tactical games from this period, it's viewed from an isometric perspective. The sets are rich with detail, the lighting and shadows are realistic enough, and the characters themselves are well drawn and animated. Most importantly, it's easy to see what's going on and understand the scenario in front of you. I think that Desperados is probably one of the better examples of this sort of graphics from the pre-3D era, and even today it's very comfortable to look at. The interface has quite a lot of character and suits the game's theme and setting, plus there are hotkeys for everything, so accurate control isn't much of a problem after a bit of practice. Generally, the missions consist of getting from A to B without getting killed in the process. Your actual objective varies depending on the mission in question, but it's often a person of interest that must be freed, captured, interrogated or killed, and sometimes all of the above. The way is blocked by a whole horde of guards, some of which are in fixed positions, some on patrol routes, and some enjoying a good sipping whiskey inside a saloon, ready to respond if the alarm is raised. There are often some civilians in the mix. They won't attack you, but they might run off and alert a nearby guard if they see you. In most scenarios, you are free to deal with the guards however you see fit, although there's at least one mission where deadly force is forbidden. Occasionally, the way forward will be obvious and the map will present you a specific way to handle a group of enemies, such as cutting a rope to bring something large crashing down onto a group of guards, but more often than not, it's up to you to figure out the best way to make progress. The game gives you very little help in this regard, and it's up to you to spend time assessing the patrol routes and fields of vision so you can actually put together a plan. Between John and his associates, you do have quite a lot of tools available at your disposal, and generally I've found that each problem has several right answers and a near infinite number of wrong ones. The main obstacle is that the guards normally demonstrate sensible behaviour. If they hear a noise or catch sight of you, they will often investigate in teams rather than sending out a single individual. If they hear gunshots or explosions, they'll all come running to check out the situation, and if you suddenly disappear, then they'll spend some time running around looking for you. They don't all follow the exact same playbook, so the first time you encounter a specific guard you can never be quite sure if they're going to shoot on sight, come closer to investigate, immediately run off to raise the alarm, or hold their ground and keep a sharp eye out. I was actually quite impressed at the level of detail that was put into your opponents. Don't get me wrong, they're not exactly the world's smartest antagonists, but they do exhibit some behaviour that's lacking in other similar games. They notice and investigate dead bodies as you might expect, but sometimes they also notice when another guard disappears and is no longer at his post. Alongside their behaviours, they're also decent shots, especially at close range, and it's not unusual to be killed in a single bullet if you're caught unawares. Thankfully, your team is also pretty handy with their own weapons, and if you've attracted the attention of a group of enemies out of earshot from the others, then sometimes the best course of action is to forget about stealth and mercilessly gun them down as they run around the corner to investigate. One thing I really enjoyed about the missions was the almost sandbox nature of the challenges they presented. There isn't much in the way of predetermined paths or map-specific solutions to problems, but instead you're just given an objective and must figure out the best way to achieve that using the tools at your disposal. Some of the more powerful tools, like the knockout gas capsules or the sticks of dynamite, have limited uses and are best saved for the harder encounters, while others, like Kate's distraction tricks or John's throwing knives, are perfect for dealing with single guards or roaming patrols. Every single member of your team has their own specific abilities, and you must lean on all of them to get the job done. John and Kate excel at dealing with stragglers, but Sam and Doc McCoy are absolutely essential when dealing with large groups of enemies, particularly those at long distance with wide lines of sight. One thing I did become aware of after I was a few missions deep is how there was nothing in the way of character improvement, and that I didn't actually miss it one bit. Plenty of other games of this sort would have me gaining experience, unlocking new skills, gaining new items and customising my abilities, but Desperados has none of this, and it's no worse off for it. It can be pretty easy to fall into the trap of thinking that more features automatically makes a better game, but I don't think that's always true. It's understandable that some games like to give you huge amounts of development and customization, so you don't get bored of doing the same thing over and over again, but I think that's sometimes a symptom of bad game design. Desperados should be given a lot of credit for how it handles this. Each mission is very different from the previous one, and the situations within each mission are highly varied. This means that you are constantly finding new ways to combine and use your starting abilities, and as such they don't get stale from repeated use. The enemies don't become tougher as the game develops, they don't gain armour, or an increased health pool, or much in the way of deadlier weapons. There might be more of them as the game progresses, they might be more alert, patrol more often, have closer backup or be more suspicious, but they still go down to a well-placed shot in the chest or a knife in the back. You don't need to unlock a 3% critical chance boost or equip tier 2 armour. It actually feels quite liberating to just be able to enjoy the story and get involved in the game for a change. One thing I will say, this is not a game for the faint-hearted. It's got to be one of the most difficult games I've played in a very long time. Now, I don't say that lightly, and I think I've almost worn out the quick load button on my keyboard after a week. This isn't the sort of experience where you carefully progress through the mission, occasionally restarting if it all goes wrong. You'll need to constantly save your progress as you play, as you may easily lose count of the number of times you have to reload. This isn't akin to save scumming an XCOM-like game, but more like attempting the perfect execution of a segmented speedrun.
Well, now let's see.
Hey, hombre!
I think this goes some distance to explain the mixed reviews that followed the game's release. If your brain is wired in such a way that you relish the challenge of attempting a complicated puzzle through trial and error, tweaking the variables each time, then I think you'll love Desperados. If not, you'll hate it and immediately uninstall near the end of the first mission, and I won't blame you for it, as I almost did the same thing. Thankfully, by the time I was on my 4th or 5th mission, I started to properly understand the game that was in front of me and really started to enjoy it. Aside from the in-mission work, the game is reasonably competent. The voice acting gets a little wooden at times and the characters are pretty stereotypical, which is a little bit of a shame considering how good the actual gameplay is. The story and dialogue is a bit cheesy, but overall it's perfectly serviceable for this sort of game, and although it could have been better, it didn't ruin the experience for me. I enjoyed the Old West setting. Normally these sorts of games are populated with special forces, mercenaries or super spies, so it was a nice change of scenery from what I'm used to. It's not really an accurate portrayal of the Old West, and there's plenty to nitpick in that regard, but I think it does a good job of capturing the feeling of Western films that were popular in the 60s and 70s. The only thing that bothered me was the explosive crates and barrels were labelled TNT, which wasn't used as an explosive until the 1900s, but that's one of those weird things that stuck in my brain for some reason and isn't what I consider a relevant critique. Finally, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. It's hard to talk about Desperados without talking about Commandos. They are pretty similar games, and I've seen some refer to the game as a Commandos clone. These days, calling something a clone normally implies that it's a cheap and lazy rip-off, and I don't think that's very fair at all. Desperados is a game that stands on its own merits, and although it features similar gameplay elements, that's true of pretty much all games that share a genre. As far as I can see it, Commandos invented the stealth-focused subgenre of real-time tactics games, and Desperados is one of several entries in that subgenre. Overall, I've really enjoyed playing Desperados. I've not finished it yet, but I'm sure I will, and I'm very happy to see that there are two sequels that followed it, Desperados 2 and Eldorado, released in 2006 and 2007. I'm also interested to see that they continued the series once again in 2020 with Desperados 3, so it'd be nice to have a go at a modern interpretation of the game. I don't think I can universally recommend it. It's a bit of a niche experience that isn't quite suitable for everyone, but if you like this sort of game and have a lot of patience, I think you'll really enjoy it.
Seems like they were expecting us.
Caramba! This place is overrun with rats!
Okay, let's split up. Kate and Mia, leave the train by the door onto the tracks.
Hi there! I want to give a big thanks to Tana Dina from the comments section for the excellent recommendation. If anyone has played Desperados or has a similar recommendation, I would love to hear from you, so please leave a comment. And if you enjoyed this video, then click the like button. I've also set up a Discord, which is linked in the channel description if you want to join. I don't really have a purpose for it yet, but a few people suggested it, so that's what I did. And as usual, if you want more of this sort of thing, then subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you back soon.